Morning. You see those words up there? Every one of us, at some point or another, can take one of those words and apply it directly to our lives. Maybe this morning that's where you are. Maybe all three of them apply. Maybe you're discouraged, you're disillusioned, and depressed all at the same time. Sadly, what will happen is, what we'll do is, as adults, we'll take those terms in our own life and we'll teach them to those little kids who are so innocent, taking all that money and running back there, and we'll teach it to them. Because those terms will make us do things that we wouldn't normally do. We have to remember, and I'm going to teach you this morning, or try to teach you, that God has a plan. You may not understand the plan. You may not agree with the plan, but He's got a plan nonetheless. There's a lot of things going on in our society right now, with pandemic and with morality issues and with warfare going on and all the talk about all the stuff that's going on. It can get down, can't it? It can get depressing at times. And sometimes those emotions will cause us to do things that we wouldn't normally do. Isn't that true? We'll act in a way we wouldn't normally act. You know, during the pandemic, I don't know the statistics, but I know that there was an increase in child abuse during the pandemic. I know that there was an increase in the incidences of suicide during the pandemic. There was increase in incidences of spousal abuse during the pandemic. I don't have specifics. I just heard that that's what happened. People get depressed, and they get down, and they get discouraged. And I'm going to talk to you this morning about a guy who many of you will know the name. His name is Elijah. And Elijah is a prophet of God, powerful prophet of God. He is so unique to the Old Testament that he is one man that never experiences death. God takes him up before he dies. And if you remember when Jesus, on the Mount of Transfiguration, who's there? Elijah's there. John the Baptist is said he is the reincarnate or the coming back of Elijah himself. And you'd think this man of God, this huge prophet, would have his act together, wouldn't you? Nah, not so much. Not so much. Let me tell you a little bit about Elijah, okay? Elijah grows up and starts to prophesy during the divided kingdom. The northern kingdom is ruled by rulers that are never any of them any good. All of them are bad. Every single one, they never have a good king ever. But during the time of Elijah, the king is especially bad. But he's probably not the worst one. His wife is probably worse. You'll know them. Their names are Ahab and Jezebel. And God takes Elijah and tells him in chapter 17, and we're not going to read all of this, I'm just going to tell you the story. Takes him in chapter 17 and says, I want you to go to Ahab, who's a stinker, and I want you to tell him it's not going to rain until I say so again. It's not going to rain for 3 years. 3 years it's not going to rain. And then after he tells Ahab that, God sends him off into the wilderness, and he says, I'm going to feed you and water you. I'm going to take care of you. Don't worry about anything. I'll make the birds come and give you food. And I'll have you by a brook, and you can have refreshing water. And I'm going to take care of you. And that's important because of what's going to happen next in a bit. And then after 3 years, and the drought has come, and his brook is dried up, and God comes to him and says, I need you to go back where you came from. You go back. And so he goes, okay? And he goes, and while he's going there, he finds a man named Obadiah. And Obadiah tells him, oh, Elijah, it's so great to see you. And Elijah says, I want you to go to King Ahab and tell him that I'm back, and it's going to start raining. I'll meet with him at such and such time. And Obadiah said, I'm not going over there. Nope. You don't understand. The guy's a killer, man. The guy's been hunting you everywhere. If I come and you don't show up, he's going to kill me. No, I'm not going over there. Oh, but I want to tell you something. I have protected 100 of the priests and prophets of God. 50 in one cave, 50 in another. I've been feeding them, taking care of them, because I knew at some point everything was going to turn around. And he said, you got to go tell him. I don't really want to go. He says, you got to go tell him. I don't want to go. And so he goes. Finally he goes and he tells Ahab that Elijah's coming. Okay? And if you look, if you go to chapter 18, and we're not going to look over there, I just want you to see. When Ahab shows up, God said, when Elijah shows up, Ahab says, "Oh, there you are, you troubler of Israel." And Isaiah says, "It ain't been me. You're the one. You and your family is the one that's brought all this harm to Israel, not me." And he says, "I want to meet with the prophets of Baal, and I want to meet with them on Mount Carmel." Okay? Now remember, he's already seen it not rain for 3 years. Now it's rained, all right? And he said, "I want to meet with these priests, and I want to meet with them on Mount Carmel, these prophets on Mount Carmel." He said, "You bring all of your prophets, and you tell them that they're going to get to call on their God. And they'll call as long as they need, and if they can show that God shows up, their God shows up, then Israel can follow them. But if not, and God shows up, then Israel's going to follow God." And you know the story. He meets with them, and he has them cut up an animal for sacrifice, puts it on the altar, and they holler and scream and shout and cut themselves and jump up and down and act like complete fools. And their gods never show up. Altar's still standing there, still got the wood, still got the sacrifice. And Isaiah said, "Y'all done? Y'all done?" So he tells them to bring water, and he brings pitcher after pitcher after pitcher after pitcher of water, and he pours it all over the altar and all over the sacrifice and all over the wood, and then he calls on God, and God rains down fire from heaven and consumes the water, the sacrifice, the altar, and everything there, consumes it. It's gone. And then he says, "Take all these prophets, 450 prophets of Baal," and you take them out in the Kidron Valley, and they kill every one of them. And chapter 19 starts in verse 1, and it says, now think about this. We're talking about Elijah here, and everything that Elijah has seen. No rain, now it's rained. God has rained down fire from heaven and drank up the water. He made him dig a ditch, and the ditch was full of water. Now you expect if it was gasoline, that would work, but not water. And God has ate up the water with the fire. Pretty impressive, wouldn't you say? It would be, you know, it would be impressive to me if a bird came and dropped me a hamburger. That would be really impressive to me. I wouldn't need a lot more. But evidently, Elijah needs more. And in chapter 19, it says in verse 1, you have it up there. It says, "Now Ahab told Jezebel everything that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword." Now listen to what Jezebel does. "So Jezebel sends a messenger to Elijah to say, 'May the gods deal with me be ever so severely if by this time tomorrow I do not take your life like that of one of them.'" God ain't threatened him. Ahab didn't threaten him. This woman has said, "I'm going to send him a message," and said, "By this time tomorrow, I'm going to make sure you're dead." Now you'd think, here's Elijah, and he's watched fire from heaven. He's watched birds feed him. He's watched it not rain, then rain. You'd think, I ain't afraid of you. What am I scared of you for? That's not what happens. Remember those 3 words? You may say, "It could never happen to me. I can never get that depressed. I can never get that discouraged, never get that disillusioned." Oh yeah. It happened to this great man of God. Look at what he does, what happens next. Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. What? He ran for his life. It says, when he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there. Wait a minute. And I'm going to read through this, and I'm going to come back and show you the 3 things that he does that's typical of what we do when this happens in our lives. He said, while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, he came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. "I have had enough, Lord," he said. "Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors." Laid down under the bush and fell asleep. First thing, what's he afraid of? What's he afraid of? But sometimes that happens to us, doesn't it? The pandemic scares us to death, and everybody's wearing masks. And I'm not saying that's not right or whatever, but people get afraid. And they lock themselves up in their house, and they're terrified, and they get discouraged and depressed. And then something else happens, and you go to the doctor, and now you're sick. And everything, I asked somebody one time, I said, "Where's all the colds and all the bronchitis that we used to have? What happened to all that stuff? We don't just get sick anymore." Well, you get sick, and you automatically think, now I'm going to die. Or you lose your job because of it. Or now there's knuckleheads. Somebody asked me, "Why is there so much evil?" I said, "Because evil people do evil stuff." That's what they do. You know, we got people invading other countries, and our brethren are suffering for it. And so I'm looking at this and I'm saying, you run when God is the only one. Remember something, God's got a plan here, all right? He does have a plan. Just because Elijah doesn't know what the plan is, just because you don't know what the plan is, doesn't mean he doesn't have a plan. He's got a plan for your life. Now, you may sit here and say, I don't really want anything to do with God. He has crossed me numerous times. I don't want to have nothing to do with him. What? Then where are you going to go? Who are you going to go to? If God's the only one that's got a plan that can fulfill you and satisfy you and get you to where you're looking to go, then why are you going to go anywhere else? I'm afraid, so I'll run. And then what does he do? He leaves his friends behind. Isn't that what we do? How many times have we fallen into that category, in that place where I feel depressed and discouraged and disillusioned and then disenfranchised, whatever the word you want to use, and I look around and I say, you know what? I can't talk to my wife. I can't talk to my husband. I used to get like that. And I wouldn't talk to my family for weeks at a time. Yeah, devastating that can be in a family. And I thought, this is a plan. God will get me through. No, that's not a plan. He put him in my life for a reason. You know, this guy's in his life for a reason. And yet we're going to cut and run first off at the threat of this woman. And then he sits down under this broom bush and he said, I just want to die. God, just kill me. Do you see some self-pity here? Look at his self-pity. You know, I just want to, man, I've had enough. You know, he said, I've had enough, Lord. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. I'm no better than anybody else. Just, I want to die. I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. That happens. You know why I'm up here on Fourth Sunday? And why many of us that have been up here on Fourth Sunday? To give him a break. Because you know what we know can happen? That can happen. And it can happen easy. So we're trying to monitor, make sure that doesn't happen to him. It doesn't happen to his family. That's what we're doing it for. Because we know that what happened, I give up. You ever felt like giving up? You get disenchanted, you get depressed, and just, you know, I'm disillusioned with life. It's never going to get any better. It's always going to be bad. And God must not love me anymore. Or you know what? Maybe it's I don't love him anymore. I'm tired of dealing with him. I don't want to deal with him anymore. He's never showed up. Not one time I've asked him. I prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed, and my family still got sick and still went south, and so I don't love him anymore. I'm not going to follow him anymore. Ever happened to some of you? It may be where you are now. Maybe it's someone online. Just happened to find us, and that's where they are. I prayed and prayed and prayed yesterday and today that God would find somebody with a heart that need to hear this. That needed to say, I know exactly what you're talking about. Now, God shows up, and I'm not going to read all this. I'm going to tell you, God shows up. He shows up to where Elijah has run to. And he says, you know what? You need to get up and eat because the journey I got for you is you're not going to be able to deal with it. So he gets him up and so he puts him down and he feeds him. And then Elijah runs 40 days and 40 nights. He runs away. And you know where he ends up? He ends up at Mount Horeb or Mount Sinai. That's as far south as you can go. You go any more south and you know where you're going to be? In Egypt. It's as far as you can go. And then look at verse 9. This is what we're going to read, start in verse 9. It says, there he went into a cave and spent the night. He got there. 40 days and 40 nights have been running. No friends, terrified of Jezebel, and full of self-pity and said, I just want to die. Maybe he's running that far. If I ran 40 days, 40 nights, it's going to kill me, so I won't have to have God kill me. It would kill me all by itself. But he said, and then listen to what happened. And the word of the Lord came to him. What are you doing here, Elijah? What are you doing? You think God's ever looked at you and said, Dan, what are you doing? I've got a plan for you. And this, James laughing. God looking at you and said, what are you doing? I never sent you over here. He said, I sent you into the valley and I fed you and made sure you had water. But I never sent you here. And then look at what it says. And it says, God showed up. And he said, I want you to go stand at the mouth of the cave. And he's going to show up. I'm not going to read all this. You can read it up. He's going to go, and he's going to show up. And he before that, in verse 10, he said, replied, I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too. Oh, poor thing. I've said that to myself before. You poor thing. God doesn't have any clue what you're going through. He just doesn't love you anymore. That's the way you feel when you get like that. And he said, then the Lord, in verse 11, said, go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. And then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. And the voice said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? So God doesn't say it once, he says it twice. What are you doing here? Why did you decide this was a plan? I'm going to run from God. I'm going to run as far as I can go. I can't go no farther. I've run into a fence, and I'm done. And I'm going to tell God, I don't want to live anymore. I don't believe in you anymore. I don't believe that you really know what you're doing anymore. I don't believe you've got a plan. Is that what we say? Maybe not in words, but that's what we said, didn't we? And you know what God says? Says, you don't have any idea what you're talking about, Elijah. You have no clue what you're talking about. You know, I look around this room and I know that there are so many of us that have experienced this in our lives. And we've done exactly what Elijah's done. We've run. We've abandoned the people that are closest to us that can help us the most. And then we've turned it into a pity party waterworks where we look in a mirror and believe what Satan is telling us, that we're no good, that we've never been any good, and that God doesn't care about us anymore. He doesn't want to love us anymore. And we've seen it result in all kinds of catastrophes in our lives, haven't we? We've seen marriages busted up, families gone, children not faithful. We've seen all of that happen because they fed off of the adults in their lives and they saw what they did, what you didn't ever think they were looking at. And then you never allowed God back in your life. If that's the case, this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity this morning. I'm going to learn from Elijah, and I'm going to learn what is it that God is expecting me. Is that where I'm at? Am I in that place where God says, what are you doing here? How did you get to where you are? You certainly did. I didn't threaten you. I didn't threaten you. Did he? Who threatened him? Jezebel. Did she have any power over God? No. But isn't that what we do? We listen to someone who has no control and no power, and we buy it. Satan doesn't have any control over us if we walk in the light. If we're washed by the blood, he doesn't have any power over us. He doesn't have any power. He can't do anything. He can't hurt me. Now, he can take my life and turn it upside down, but he can't hurt me. How can he do anything to me that God can't fix? See, Elijah forgot that, I guess. He forgot that God can fix it. In fact, God goes to him and says, I don't know what you're doing here. And he says, he tells him again, I've been very zealous. I've done everything, but I'm the only one left. Now they're trying to kill me too. He says it again. And God says, wait a minute. You need to understand something, Elijah. I'm gonna fill you in on a little secret. I have a plan. You know what my plan is? I want you to go and anoint 3 guys. And one of them is a king of Aram, a king of another country. He said, I want you to go anoint that guy king. And I want you to go find your successor. His name is Elisha with an S. So I want you to go find this guy, okay? And I'm going to tell you, my plan is the first guy you're going to appoint is going to kill these people. The second guy is going to kill those people. And Elisha's going to mop up the rest. I already got a plan. I'm going to take care of it. And oh, by the way, I got a news flash for you, Elijah. And look at verse 18. I got a news flash. Verse 18 says, yet I reserve 7,000 in Israel, all whose knee have not bowed down to Baal and whose mouths have not kissed him. What was Elijah's complaint? I am the only one left. He knew that was not true because Obadiah already told him there was 100 of them that he had hidden. So he knows that's not true. But what does God tell him? I'm bigger than Obadiah. Bigger than you. I got 7,000 that have not bowed their knee. There's people over in Ukraine. There's people that are washed by the blood, that are trying to survive. And you know what? I'm praying for them that they do not abandon God. Because I know God's not going to abandon them, that they don't abandon God. Because it gets really easy. I can't say that because I don't know. I don't know what it's like. But I would imagine it get really easy to abandon God when you got bombs killing your children. Don't you think? I think that would be pretty gruesome. Pulling out bodies out of blowed up buildings, out of schools and hospitals. I think that'd be pretty tough. Be pretty hard, wouldn't it? What I got to remember? That God's got a plan. God's got a plan. He had one for Elijah, and he said, just because you didn't know the plan doesn't mean I don't have one. He said, I got these 3 guys already set aside. He tells them who they are. You go get those guys and you appoint them, and that's what they're going to do. And then, oh, by the way, I got one more point. I got 7,000 people that have not bowed down to them. Did Elijah know it? No, he didn't know that. He didn't have a clue. What do you think? I'm alone. You know, after God shows up, he runs for 40 days and 40 nights trying to do what? Get away from God? Yep, that's exactly what we do, don't we? Try to get away from God. We run away trying to get away from Him. And what does God do? He always shows up. And He says, what are you doing here? So if you've been disillusioned, depressed, discouraged, join the club. Even Elijah got that way. We may look at it now and look, this is ridiculous. Why would he respond this way? Look in the mirror, folks. Look in the mirror. You want to know what God's plan is? You want to know what His will is? He tells us. We don't have to guess. He tells us. Go to Romans chapter 12 and verse 2. He says, do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will. I can know, but I can't do it with this mindset, like this, like that. I can't do it with that. I have to conform, be transformed. How? By allowing God to teach me and train me and letting the Holy Spirit lead me. That's the only way. And if that's not what you're doing this morning, you know what? You may still be running. Maybe you're still running away from God and you haven't even run 40 days yet. You're still going. I'm here to tell you, stop running. Stop running. It's time to stop and let God transform you and take you to where you need to be and let Him map out His plan. And how do you know that right out the box, the next thing that's going to happen is going to be a part of that plan unfolding, and you're going to go, oh my, I had no idea. Of course you don't. He doesn't feel. How many of you have children? Raise your hands. How many of you inform your children about all the plans you have? Huh? How many? Plans to do whatever. Whatever. If you tell your children you're going on vacation, oh my gosh. You know when you tell them? The day before. Tell them the day before. You don't tell them months before because they'll hound you and rag on you. You know what is God? God's not going to tell you everything. You don't need to know. What I need to do? What's Cole been trying? Trust God. Trust God that He's got a plan. Folks, I pray for you guys. I do. I pray all the time that God will unfold parts of His plan so that you can be mindful and you can get away from this. Because this will kill you. This will kill you. And it'll kill your children. If you're here this morning and you have not put on Christ, then this is a normal lifestyle. That's normal. But it doesn't have to be normal. Doesn't. Jesus, like Glenn so eloquently did during the communion thought, Jesus came to give us freedom and to buy us back with His blood. That's what's possible for us when we believe in Him and when we're baptized into Christ and we put Him on in baptism and we live faithful to Him. That's what He calls us to. That's the invitation this morning. You don't have to live like this. Look at that guy. Look at that. See him? You may not have done that physically, but many of us have done that spiritually. We've looked just like that. And thank you guys for finding that slide. I appreciate that. Guys, we're going to sing an invitation song. And it's designed for you to look at this lesson and say, I need to get my act together. I need to get back on track. Get your life back on track. Get away from this and get back to the joy and the passion and the love of God. Let's say and sing.